Hello, my friends, and welcome to the inaugural episode of the $20 or Less podcast, the podcast that knows that video games are expensive. We're recording live on January 25th, 2015, and I'm your host, JD, aka Gaddock Teeg, and with me today is my co-host, Cosmic Engine. How you doing today, Cosmic?
I'm very good, apart from being full of cold. Like, I think you're sick as well, aren't you?
Yeah, just a little bit of getting over it, finally.
Yeah, apart from that, pretty good.
Yeah, so, I don't know, well, let's just describe what we'll be talking about in this podcast going forward. So, the goal of this podcast is kind of a general gaming podcast that focuses on the gamer who has a budget. You know, not everyone can spend $60 every day on every new AAA game that comes out. So hopefully we'll be able to discuss and tell you what the good games are and what the bad games are, because we all know there's a load of crap out there that you want to avoid. So, with that, let's describe ourselves, because you may not know me or may not know Cosmic. So you may know me. I've been doing a Star Wars The Old Republic podcast for a while, and in that podcast I discussed my opinions on the game, mostly focused on PvE. I'm mostly a PvEer in that game and in most MMOs, but I'm kind of starting to burn out on MMOs a little bit. I think I need a break. I need a hiatus from that, as I think anyone who's played an MMO long term can understand. So I decided to get into this podcast. I've loved video games my whole life. I've been playing since I was 5 years old. I remember playing Mega Man with my dad, and he had to beat the hard levels because I couldn't. And so yeah, that's mostly my background. What about you, Cosmic?
I do video game reviews on YouTube. I've done it for about a year now. I started off originally doing it. I always wanted to go on YouTube, and I started off originally just kind of covering MMOs. I did a Star Wars The Old Republic weekly show, which was just basically a 10-minute, 15-minute video every week, recapping the news and my thoughts on the news. And then I decided that I really didn't like MMOs that much. And I decided to try reviews and actually found that I was okay at it. And I actually found that it was more fun than talking about MMOs. So I did that, and then I continued. I do a video game critique series, and I also just started a new series on critiquing early access games, because I don't like early access games.
Well, yeah, Lord knows everyone needs to critique early access games far more than they do, that's for sure. I've been actually playing a little H1Z1. I don't want to talk too much about it because I think we're going to cover that in next week's podcast. But yeah, I could say a lot about that game for sure.
Well, I think the problem with early access games is that, like, for the longest time, a lot of traditional games reviewers and indeed YouTubers struggled to find a format to take a critical look at them, because as a reviewer, you always run into the problem of an early access game doesn't fit into a review format. And then, of course, early access games are constantly changing. So you put out a video, and then next week it might be completely irrelevant because they might have updated the game, changed the features. But I found myself, regularly saying on my reviews that, I want, reviewers should be, pro-consumer, and, we're taking a look at games to help you decide on what you want to buy and what's worth your money and what isn't worth your money. And the problem is early access games, since early access came out, have just got away with murder. And a lot of people have been duped out of money for a lot of the time. So I went to the drawing board, and I kind of thought, well, there's got to be a way of kind of producing a format to look at early access games critically without kind of the developers falling back on the defense of, well, it's not finished yet.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, they're still asking money for an unfinished product. So I decided to make videos looking at what's actually there in the early access version and if it's worth the price tag.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. A lot of times the developers, they seem to use early access as a smokescreen to, do whatever they want and say whatever they want, claim, oh, it's going to have all these great features, and it has none of them. Well, it'll get there someday. I mean, if you put monkeys in a room for long enough, they'll eventually make it. So
it's a lot of promises. It's a lot of it's based on good faith and promises, which I don't think is okay, especially for the money that the they're producing it. And I'm not saying that early access is all bad, because there's a lot of indie games, especially, that wouldn't be able to get made without things like early access. But a lot of developers use and abuse the system.
Yeah, I totally agree with you there. And it's really bled into other games too. Even AAA games, you hear about Evolve going gold while it goes into beta. That doesn't make sense. Things like that don't make sense. So it's a slippery slope, and I think we're unfortunately slipping down that slope. So hopefully things get better. I know Steam definitely needs to put their foot down on certain things, and it sounds like they are, but it seems like a lot of talk and not a lot of action. So we'll see what they do in the future. So I talked about H1Z1 a little bit. What have you been playing?
Well, I've been playing quite a few games the past week. I've been reviewing an indie RTS game called Mechs and Mercs Black Talons.
Also, how is that? I've heard about that game. I'm very excited to try it. I haven't yet.
Well, my review will be coming out next week, but it's awful.
What? No! It's a game called Mechs and Mercs. What else could you need?
The problem with it is, and I think the biggest problem is, I mean, it is an indie game, so there is certain things that it's not going to be the greatest graphics in the world, the greatest textures and stuff. But the problem is it tries to be too many things at once, because they've essentially put in like a management system. They've put in like RPG elements, so each of your squads can be leveled up and gain new perks. And they've put in. They've tried to do too much, and I feel like they've overreached. And the problem with it intrinsically is it's less of an RTS kind of like StarCraft. It's more like something like Dawn of War 2, where the actual combat is about squad-based tactics. And they've just forgot some really key fundamentals about RTS games in the actual mechanics of the game, and it just doesn't work at all. The game is unbalanced, and it's just awful.
Like what? Like I love the Dawn of Wars and the Company of Heroes. I think those are great games. One of my favorite games that never got released was Company of Heroes Online. It was a really cool MMO-ish Company of Heroes game. And my friends and we got really hardcore into it, and then they were like, we don't feel like releasing it anymore. So development stopping and no more beta, which made me really sad. But what does Mercs and Mechs do that screws up the formula?
I think, the biggest problem just at the start is the balance. You essentially have squads of units, and then you have mechs, and the squads of units are basically divided into four unit types, which is light armor, medium armor, heavy armor, and engineers. And the problem is that the way that the game is balanced is that basically anything other than heavy armor units are completely worthless and useless. They're not even good as cannon fodder, because light units and medium units can't do enough damage to take down any enemy units quick enough, and they don't have enough defense to put up any kind of a fight. So you essentially end up having to just go into each battle with a lot of heavy armored units, and then you'll basically win every time, and that's the only way to do it. And they don't have... The problem is that the unit speed is so slow, and units are just so squishy that, for example, in Dawn of War 2, you had a mechanic where if you engaged in a fight and you were losing, but you didn't want to lose your squads entirely, you could retreat, which would you would lose control of your units, and the units would run back, but they would gain defense bonuses on the way back, so they wouldn't be completely destroyed. Yeah,
that was a key mechanic to the systems in that game.
Mechs and Mercs doesn't have that. And you don't have base building or anything like that, so you have a set number of units to get the mission complete, and if they all die, it's permadeath, so they're gone forever.
Oh, really?
And then on top of that, you can't do anything after they're gone. And you can, like in Dawn of War 2, if a few of your men die in a unit, you can reinforce them, but you don't. Once they're gone, and that's it. And you only have a select number of reinforcement squads available to you through a mission. I think it's something like 4, whereas the enemy has infinite number of reinforcements. So, and the game is almost it sounds like it's almost designed that the AI doesn't patrol. It just comes directly at you wherever you are on the map. So
that's great.
If you get caught off guard, that's it. The game is over. And it doesn't. There's just some basic mechanics and fundamental flaws in that game that they've tried to do the best creating an RTS, but haven't, and they've just created a really poor RTS.
Right. And is there any economy elements, or like do you capture points to gain additional squads? Or
there is only one resource, which is power, and you use that power to. The only thing you can use it for is to request reinforcements. But as I say, you've got like 4 times that you can only do that, so it's ultimately pointless. I don't even know why they had the resource point in there, because there's no need.
Yeah, that's funny. Well, I've been playing a much better version of what it sounds like that game would like to be, and that is Advanced Wars on the Wii U Virtual Console. It's one of my favorite games of all time. I just picked it up because I just got a Wii U right before I left for Japan, which was a couple weeks ago, and then I haven't really had a ton of time to play it, but I got on the Virtual Console and I saw Advanced Wars was on there. It's something I've been wishing they put on the DS, but they gave it to the early adopters of the DS before they did the big price drop, and they said they'd never do it again. So I wish I would have bought my DS for $150 extra if I could have Advance Wars on it, because that game is just so much fun. I love that game. I have an intense love for that game because they do everything so well. It does the Fire Emblem formula in like a warfare style, and it all makes sense. The base building, the capture points, it all fits together really well. All the CO powers, they're interesting, they're cool, they're unique, and everyone has a personality. I think that game has tons of charm and personality as well as a great game.
Yeah, I mean, the only reason I bought my 3DS was for Fire Emblem. That was the only game I wanted. That's the sole reason I made that purchase, and I absolutely adore that game.
Yeah, that's another great game, but very punishing game. I decided to play that game on hard. I've never played a Fire Emblem game on hard, and I was immediately regretting it. Like 3 missions in, 3 people had died. I'm like, I think I need to restart. Like, no salvaging this.
Absolutely love that game. But I've also been playing Blackguards 2, which is the sequel to Blackguards, which came out actually last year. It came out January of last year by Gaddock Entertainment, which is a tactical turn-based RPG. Which essentially the first game put you in the role of like basically brigands and kind of criminal characters, and then it's about basically criminal characters saving the world in their own way.
Okay.
Now I really enjoyed the first one. I gave the first one quite a good review. It definitely had some flaws and balance issues, which they sorted out eventually in patches. And I was actually quite surprised that they released a sequel so soon, because a year on, that's not really enough time to make a sequel. But
right,
what it seems to be is they've taken the original and kind of made improvements with the community feedback and made improvements to the gameplay, and they've reused a lot of the assets from the first, which is why the development time I feel was so short, is because it's basically the same map, it's the same locations, but it's just a different storyline, and it's more. I think it's a lot more interesting of a storyline because you're essentially playing a really good, interesting female character, whereby she was the wife of basically a nobleman, a ruler, and then one day she wakes up and she's in a prison, and they've taken her by night, and she spends like 4 years there and gets bitten by all these spiders that deform her and make her go a little bit mad. And it's essentially you then go on a conquest to basically rule the entire land. And I haven't really played that much of it yet. I'm planning to do a review on it in the next 2 weeks, but I quite enjoy it. But it's definitely, I don't see it being a sequel because there's not that much new in it. I think they should have maybe put it as an expansion or something like that. I think that because of a lot of its reused assets.
Yeah. It sounds a lot like a really good expansion, like a Ballad of Gay Tony kind of deal, where they just take the same engine, same assets, but do a totally different story. And Ballad of Gay Tony is a great expansion, so I couldn't fault them if they did something like that.
Like you, I've been playing H1Z1, which is a game.
We'll talk about it next week.
Yeah, and I've been playing. I haven't had a chance to play much of the Repopulation, which is on an MMO on early access. I kind of went into it for a little bit. It's kind of ugly at the moment, but I'll be interested to see what kind of mechanics they have going. I don't really like MMOs, but I did want to do a video on it, so I'll be playing that over the next week. And in the middle of the week, I got access to Obsidian Entertainment's RPG Pillars of the Earth. No, not Pillars of the Earth, Pillars of Eternity.
Oh, yes, right.
which is coming out in March, and I absolutely love that game.
That was one of the Kickstarters, right?
It was Kickstarted, and it's an old school isometric RPG.
Mm-hmm.
So everything, all the landscape is all set, the camera angles are set, and and basically what it's allowed them to do is to create some really fantastic art assets on the landscape and the buildings, and everything just looks just phenomenal.
Right.
So I'm really looking forward to getting into that more.
Now, did you back it? Is that why you got early access?
No, I didn't back it. I just got a key from the developer.
Oh, you got a key? Okay, that's cool. Do you know when that's due out? When is that?
I think it's something like around the end of March. I think it's something like the 27th of March.
So we still got a good amount of time. So that's good. All right, yeah. So we've been very busy playing video games, which is a good sign. I like playing video games. So let's go into some news. There hasn't been a ton of news this week in the video game front. The main thing we're going to talk about is the Windows conference. And my first question to you is, when do you think we'll come up with the new press conference? You know, that we're all stuck in the Steve Jobs press conference right now. When do you think the next level of press conference is going to be, where everyone isn't wearing jeans and being really casual and walking around on wood floors?
I don't even know why they do them anymore. It's just so pointless. I mean, they're boring to watch, and they're just filled with lies anyway.
I know, the amount of faux excitement in that room I don't even know, could power a nuclear engine or something like that.
But I remember hearing a story actually from E3 last year that basically, I'm not sure what press conference it was. I wouldn't like to say if I was wrong, but there was a press conference whereby essentially they had dubbed over certain segments to put in applauses when there wasn't any, which was really interesting.
They had laugh tracks to the E3 press conference.
I think so. And I don't know whose press conference it was, but there was. I know that did occur at some point.
Well, I do know that the PS4 press conference, they brought in a whole bunch of like PlayStation Plus members into the front row, so they would go absolutely batshit crazy whenever anything was announced. It was real interesting, that's for sure. Yeah, I don't even watch E3 anymore. I just, check out the websites when all the information comes out. It doesn't matter to me anymore.
It's like that, like E3 and the Windows press conferences. There's no real point in them anymore, especially with things like E3, because take the Ubisoft press conference, for example. I don't think I saw actual gameplay.
Yeah.
In any one thing. It was just trailers and CGI and whatever, and I just thought, why am I wasting time watching this? You're not actually showing me anything.
Mm-hmm.
And I just find the whole thing very pointless.
Yeah, so Sony's capstone trailer was a picture of Nathan Drake's face. That was it. That was their big end game to their press conference. So yeah,
I don't see much of the point of them anymore.
So the big thing coming out of this Windows press conference, I think, is the HoloLens, which looks like something out of Star Trek or some futuristic technology. I mean, we are living in the Back to the Future year, so who knows what we can get this year. There's massive advancements coming in science this year, I hear, from the movie. But the HoloLens apparently lets you put on these glasses. They kind of look like the Star Trek visor. That's why I alluded to the Star Trek before. But it allows you to look at the world and see information and holograms popping up in the actual world, and it looks like it's total bullshit. What do you think?
Yes. I mean, because what they're essentially saying, it's AR rather than VR. Is that right? It's augmented reality rather than virtual reality.
That is what they're calling it.
Now, I've read a lot of comments on the press conferences on Twitch, on Reddit and stuff like that, and people are so excited about the HoloLens. Now,
okay, I'll call you cynical for a minute.
I would like to take people just back to a couple of years ago. A couple of years ago, before the new consoles, and we had the Xbox 360. Now, do you remember a certain press conference where the Kinect was first introduced?
I remember that.
And there was lots of things that Kinect did in that press conference that never actually came true, as I recall.
Yeah, I'm gonna embarrass myself here, but I was watching that press conference live, and I may or may not have posted on Facebook that Project Natal is the future of video games.
That's fantastic.
I actually wrote that, so I am not giving anyone the benefit of the doubt on anything anymore.
Yeah. But this kind of thing, you've got to take this with a pinch of salt. I mean, people who think that's what it's going to look like, where, they saw the video with like the Minecraft thing where the Minecraft house appeared on the dinner, the coffee table, and he was doing, I was like, come on, that doesn't exist.
No,
that does not exist.
And it's all, the trailer they showed is all bullshit, all, CGI put on the screen. Show me something that it can do. Show me what you can do with this now, and then maybe I'll give you some of the benefit of the doubt.
I mean, the whole thing, don't get me wrong, I'm sure that when it does come out, or if it comes out, that it will do some interesting things, but I don't think it'll do anything like that. I don't. Yeah. There's no way the technology is that good yet. And
I know.
I hate it when they do this at the press conferences. They show things that just aren't true, and it's just like, why are you lying?
I don't even give the benefit of the doubt to the Oculus Rift anymore. And by all accounts, that's a great piece of technology already. But until it's in my hands and I'm using it right here, I'm not gonna I can't trust it anymore. You just can't.
I like that companies are going that way. I like that companies are experimenting with AR and VR and they're trying to push the technology forward. I think that's good for gaming as well as other industries. I don't mind that they're looking into it, but I hate when they do. They try and make people believe something it's not, and I don't like that. I don't see the point in it, because all you end up doing, and I wish companies would realize, all you end up doing is disappointing people.
Right. Yeah, definitely.
That's what you end up doing.
At least with the Oculus, I give them some credit because they've delayed so long and they've put it out. They've put out multiple iterations. They're continually trying to improve the technology over many years. But so many times you come to these press conferences and they're like, "Look at this great technology! Pre-orders open now. Go do it."
I know, and I think it's something like they try and almost purvey that we're living in Star Trek Next Generation. You put these glasses on, you're in the holodeck. Yeah. That's where you are, and it's not.
All right. And that's something that we all do want to do.
Yeah.
At least I think everyone wants to do that. I totally want to do that. If you don't, you guys can stay here. I'll go to Star Trek. Which
is fine, but don't pretend that
it's preying on the people's expectations of future technology versus, giving us actual good future technology.
Yeah.
We don't have giant, stiff arm robots walking around our living rooms right now. We have Roombas and stuff. People have to see past our vision of future technology and actually make something that's useful and cool.
Yeah. The other thing that was interesting at the Windows 10 press conference was Fable Legends. Because I was interested in Fable Legends. I don't play console games anymore. But I liked that they announced that it's essentially going to be Fable Legends will be coming to Windows 10, and that it's going to be cross-platform play, so that Xbox One users and PC users will be able to play together. I really like that, and I think that for some genres, that should be implemented more. I think it wouldn't work for stuff like FPSs, but I think that for things like that and things like XCOM, tactical turn-based games, stuff like that, I would really love to see more of that. And
I think it would even work in FPSs as long as it's only in cooperative play. I don't see any reason why you shouldn't be able to hop on and play with your friends from your PC to someone's Xbox in any game, as long as you're playing together and not against other people.
Yeah, but I think that hopefully, I really hope that actually Fable Legends does really well in that regard, and that people really like the cross-platform play, because I think that I hope that companies start doing more of that to kind of create a more inclusive gaming community where it's not just PC Master Race, Xbox users, PlayStation users.
Totally,
everyone's kind of playing the games together.
Definitely,
regardless of what.
But if they really want to get some community out of this and something really big, why aren't they bringing the Halo Master Chief Collection to PC? Please, Microsoft, listen to me. I want it. Give it to me.
I never liked the Halo games.
Oh, well, then I'm just going to turn this podcast off right now. We're done. We're done here. But, yeah, and Fable Legends, is that the one that's going to be the asymmetric multiplayer, someone plays the Dungeon Master? That's I think that's the perfect kind of game to do a cross-platform thing like that, because I think the PC works really well for that God mode RTS kind of view if someone wants to play the Dungeon Master and put down traps and all that stuff. while someone playing on the Xbox is probably better off playing with something like in a dungeon party, like a Fable Legends type game, a Fable style game. So I think that works really well. I think that fits what cross-platform does well, and hopefully it does well in sales.
But we shall see.
Yeah, we shall see. So anything else interesting happen? We get free upgrades to Windows 10. I'm not going to bore you with the details of Windows 10.
Yeah.
What is this about Bard's Tale? Bard's Tale 4 will be starting crowdfunding this year.
Yeah, so Bard's Tale, Brian Fargo, who is the owner of In Exile Entertainment, who used to formerly of Interplay. Last year they released Wasteland 2, which was the sequel to the very classic Wasteland, which those of you who don't know, Wasteland was basically the inspiration for the Fallout series. And it seems that Brian kind of likes to bring back old Interplay games, which I'm all for because I loved Interplay games. Yeah. So they've decided they announced at PAX yesterday that they are going to be doing a sequel to the Bard's Tale, which I really like the Bard's Tale. I think the series is really good. So they're going to be kickstarting that this year. Because they were very, very successful with Wasteland 2's Kickstarter. And it did have a couple of problems when it came out, and there was some disappointed people, but there was very happy people. I thought that Wasteland 2 was a very good game.
Right.
So it looks like that kind of In Exile and Brian Fargo's kind of going down that route of keeping it on Kickstarter and trying to bring back basically good games and bring sequels to old. Right.
Well, that's that's a good sign because a lot of people have real fondness for those games.
Yeah, I love them.
So, is Wasteland was kind of like the what was the other game you were saying before? It's the isometric top-down RPG, right? That's what Wasteland was.
Yeah, so
right?
I mean, Wasteland was essentially. I mean, if you ever played the old Fallout games,
right?
Wasteland was the original Fallout, so to speak. And then after Wasteland, it was the Fallout game. So it was very much like the isometric top-down RPG with stats and everything that I love.
Right. Now, is Bard's Tale also one of those?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's been a couple of iterations of Bard's Tale. Bard's Tale's essentially like an old-school RPG. They did a Bard's Tale game in the early 2000s that came out on the PlayStation and Xbox and stuff like that. Which was also very good, but that was more of a. It was still a top-down game, but it was more along the lines of kind of try to mix old-school isometric RPG with more of a third-person kind of view. But it was still a very good game. But it's the great thing that people loved about Bard's Tale was things like you're able to affect the story through your choices, and it was all about the story, which is something that I always love in RPGs.
Yeah, I mean, good story in an RPG is kind of bread and butter. You need both. All right, so you got any other news you want to talk about before we jump into our game of the week?
I tried to. I mean, I've looked at PAX, but there doesn't seem to be much of interest in.
PAX South seems like kind of like a dud, like a lot of people predicted it would be. This is not a good time for video game news, I guess. I mean, everyone puts out their big games at the end of the year, and when it comes to now, we're getting some small indie games, but not a lot of information. People kind of want to save that for PAX East or other places, it seems.
I know. I mean, I kind of think January is like kind of the end of Christmas period, January, February time. If you're an indie dev, bring out your game then. That is the opportune time to bring out your video game because you're not competing with the kind of October, November time period where it's just AAAs all the way. If you want to get your game out there, I always say the start of the year is the best time for an indie developer.
I mean, this is when you get all your big indie film festivals. When your Sundance is going on right now. You got this is when they do that. So why not do your indie game festivals now too? Get all your big indie games out in the January area and avoid all those big AAA games that kind of consume the market.
Absolutely.
So speaking of smaller indie games that are released in January. This week we'll be talking about Disorder. Disorder is by developer Swagabyte Games. This is their very first game. The publisher is Screw Attack Games, so anyone familiar with the Screw Attack community, the G1 community, may know that name. You can get it for $15. It seems to only be available on Steam. I don't even see a place to buy it on their website. So if you want to check it out, it is on Steam, and you can check out the website and the link in the show notes. So Disordered is an interesting game, I think. It's a game about disorder, if you would imagine that. It's kind of follows the story of a character who's going through some kind of issue. It seems like he has a split personality. It's an indie puzzle platformer that works on the idea of duality. You have a light world and a dark world, and in both worlds, different things are happening. And in the light world, you see the story of a seemingly happy-go-lucky, but not in a great someone who's optimistic but not in a great situation, and in the dark world you see someone who's really down on their luck, really down in their situation. So, and it weaves those two together into the game Disorder. I think you like this game a little bit more than I did. So, what is your opinion on it? How do you feel? Walk us through what you thought.
I really like Disorder. I put a review out on my channel a week or two ago when the game came out. And I really, really enjoyed it. And this is coming from someone who doesn't like puzzle platformers in the slightest. My idea of fun is not jumping from platform to platform. But I really enjoyed it. And the theme of the game is essentially mental illness. And it's about, I think, putting story aside for 1 second, the thing that I think I liked about the game at its core was that the mechanics were solid. Response times for things like jumping, etc., were very good. I liked the duality aspect of implementing. You were able to essentially phase shift from light to dark at any time, and basically that would essentially change the world around you by perhaps, like, in the light side there was a stationary platform, but if you switch to dark, then that platform would move. And all that kind of mechanic, like there was some enemies in the game that in the dark they would kill you, but if you changed to light, they would just turn into jumping buttons that you could just jump on.
Yeah,
and I really liked that kind of.
It felt a little bit to me like it had Braid DNA, and I think every indie puzzle platformer these days has some Braid DNA in it. It's just how much. So yeah, definitely the moving platforms that you can change and shift phase. And have them do different things. Some platforms would disappear and reappear in other places, kind of like those old Mega Man puzzles that were so annoying. They're very annoying in this game too. Put that out there.
I thought that the essentially what you've from a critical point of view for a puzzle platformer, especially as a reviewer, when I go to look at a puzzle platformer, I have to look at things like mechanics and response times, and I also have to look, the biggest, most important thing for a puzzle platformer is to look at the progression of difficulty and complexity. And I think that the game had that in a good way. It's definitely not. It's a slower paced game, so it's not. If you've ever played something like Super Meat Boy, where it's very fast and you're kind of moving really fast, it's not that. It's not fast. It's about going through. But I thought that the difficulty and the progression of mechanics, where you would have a mechanic given to you, maybe a moving platform, and then that would change and get progressively more complex through the game. I thought they had that there. I thought they had all the core elements of a good puzzle platform.
Yeah, I actually wrote that down too. I thought the difficulty progression, which is, as you said, key to any platformer, was very good. They kind of ramped that up. I think they took a little bit too much time in the beginning. It was a little too easy, I felt, for a little too long. And then the one part that I think really turned me off to the game was the middle section where you're in like the darkness and you can only see a very small area around you, and there's like blinking lights on other moving platforms. That really, I thought they did that for too long. It wasn't fun or interesting. It was kind of just seemed like an artificial way to bump up the difficulty.
Yeah, I said that in my review too. I think that was the only segment of the game that I didn't really enjoy, because essentially what you have is everything's black, but anything that moves or basically creates a sound wave that lights up the immediate area. And I didn't like that kind of aesthetic and the look, because I thought that especially when you got into a puzzle where you had several moving platforms and then you had other bits,
Right.
it was almost the visuals and with the art style and the color scheme that they created, there was just too much going on.
Right, and which is sad, because I was thinking during those sections, hey, this developer really doesn't know how to do difficulty, so they just do some bullshitty mechanics in there to make it difficult. But then the last two levels I thought were great. They're really spot on. You had to be spot on with your platforming. You had to move quickly, and I thought those were great. So I don't know what happened in the middle there. They felt like they needed a Dark Worlds or something, but
yeah, but I mean, overall, I thought it was good, and I thought, again, as you, the last two levels of the game, I thought that the difficulty was really good, especially the very last level of the game. I must have done that 10, 15 times over to get it quite right and figure it out.
Yeah, definitely. That last level was a tough one for sure. So I guess the other portion of this game, if I was just ranking this game on its merits right now, I would say I kind of liked it. But when we get into the story, this is where we get into what I think what I think is pretentiousville. And I know you disagree, but I feel like this game tries a little too hard with its writing and its story and atmosphere. That's just how I feel.
I don't know. I do disagree with that, because essentially, for those who don't know what it is, it's essentially, the game is about mental illness, and the story, as you go along through the game, you, instead of stopping and having cutscenes, you essentially have text that appears while you're playing the game. And so, for example, if you're walking along in the light, you essentially have text that appears that talks about a specific event in the character's life, or talking about a subject. And then if you switch, once you've read that text, the kind of darker side of the text appears, and it goes very negative. And essentially the story is purposefully written to be ambiguous, so that it's never clear what is actually going on and what is kind of real and what isn't real. And it's purposely written for that, so that you can pick out what you want from it. For example, there's scenes in there that you may think that the character has split personality, or there's scenes in there that you may think that the character's suffering from depression or schizophrenia, or he's maybe going through a grievance, and it's written so that you can take multiple meanings from the same story. And I kind of see why people kind of think it's a little bit pretentious, but I don't think it is, because I think that to be pretentious, you have to kind of make more of it. You have to make more of yourself than you really are. And I don't think it's trying to do that. I think it's just trying to explain the complexity of mental health, and that it's kind of the purpose ultimately of the game is to look at mental health and have you take away something from the game. Right. And it's not the game isn't designed to have you take a specific story away from the game or a specific meaning. It's about taking away questions about mental health. And I think that, I mean, especially I'm a big advocator of mental health awareness, especially in video games, because I think a lot of people who suffer from mental health issues use video games as a coping mechanism.
Absolutely.
And I think that I like the game. I like the theme of the game. And I like the fact that the mental health issues were incorporated into the mechanics. And I didn't find it pretentious. I have to say, I can see how some people can view it as that. But a lot of people that I have discussed this with, especially those who commented on my review on YouTube, I don't think they understood the point of the game.
Right.
I think that I don't think it is pretentious. I think it's definitely ambiguous. But
I think to me, and there are a few things that immediately throw up red flags for me that I think I probably unjustly judge certain games on. I personally hate when you have a small child to take care of in a video game. I think that's a trope that's been used, and it's never used well in video games. And whenever I see that, even if it is being used fine or in an okay manner, it immediately throws up red flag. And another thing that does that for me is the purposely ambiguous writing. I think there's a time and place for it, but it's been so overused, and every indie game, it seems, these days is coming out with this ambiguous story that you can take out whatever you want from it and take your own meaning from it. And maybe that's not a knock against Disorder, maybe it's more a knock against the video game industry in general, or indie games in general. But I think it's kind of poisoned the well for the ambiguous story where you can take what you want from it for everyone. So maybe that's not a knock against Disorder, because there are a lot of things in the game that I did like. I actually really thought they did a great job melding gameplay with kind of theme and story, in the fact that a lot of areas seemed like they were dead ends, especially if you were doing all the collectibles. If you tried to get certain collectibles, there was no going back. You had to basically kill yourself to get back to where you were. I thought that was a great way to meld gameplay themes with actual themes, and, you know, make the idea of your only way out is suicide. I thought that was an important theme, and that was impactful.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the story, I think that I liked the way that the writing. I mean, I know that people found it pretentious, but I thought that it was interesting how, for example, when the character describes his family, he talks about his family without actually calling them any names. So he refers to them as brother, father, and mother. And I found it interesting, like, for example, like you talk about looking after a little kid, which you do kind of do at some point in the game, but it depends on how you look at it. Because, again, if you look at it as in the sense of, is the little brother supposed to represent his real life little brother who died and it's a grievance, or is it representing his split personality, or is it representing something else? I think it depends. I don't think it's that the Disorder actually incorporates the traditional looking after a child trope, because I don't think that that's necessarily true. Because, again, like, for example, there's a scene in the game when you very early on at the start where the character describes a car ride to school with the father and the brother, and I found it very interesting, the kind of words and the imagery that was purveyed. That basically it says kind of like the brother opened his mouth to speak, and the father's face kind of just drooped and went grey. And the imagery of that said to me that perhaps that the brother wasn't real, and that it was him talking. It was maybe his split personality or his depression or whatever talking, and the father knew that was the case, and so he kind of went, "Oh no, it's this."
Right, and I feel like this game had some great moments, and some definitely stick out to me. There's one kind of halfway through the game with a pharmacy, where you just hear this pounding noise, and then you switch to the dark world and you realize what that pounding noise is, and that really stuck with me. A visual like that really sticks with you. So it's not like the game doesn't do anything right. I feel like I just can't get over the ambiguous writing. So that might just be a me problem, not necessarily a game problem.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that has come up with other people, though. I mean, it's not just yourself. I mean, other people have said that, you know, I found it to be that kind of way, but I don't think that I don't think it was, and I mean, I can see, as I say, I can certainly see how that perception can be formed.
Right.
But I think that in the context of the game itself, I don't think it is, because mental health is a very grey issue, and it's something that. When I know this, you know, I have friends with mental health issues. I know when I was younger, I suffered with depression. It's a kind of thing. I like the writing specifically as the character's kind of monologuing his thoughts. That's how people talk when you're having a depressed episode. That's how you think.
Right.
You're not. For example, like in the negative, when you go into the dark side way, it's that's how people think. It's not about trying to be philosophical or trying to be any way to kind of be artsy or whatever. That's how people think. You think that, you know, you sit there and you think, oh, you know, there is no hope. Everything is awful. You know, that's the way people think. And I think that I like the fact of the theme of the game, and I like the fact that the game wasn't trying to tell you as a player what mental health is, and it wasn't trying to tell you. It wasn't trying to kind of impose an agenda on you. It was just kind of say, look, a game about mental health. Take away what you will.
Right.
And I like that.
And I think some of it may have been exacerbated by a few technical issues that I had with the game. I think one big issue I had with the way the story is told is that the text on the screen does not move with your character as you go.
Yeah.
It kind of stays with the scene that text goes with. But I found that hard in a puzzle platformer where you do want to keep moving. I found it hard to kind of invest myself in the story to stop, because some of those are longer moments that take, a minute or so to unfold. I felt like as much as the audio log trope has been used to, nauseating levels, I feel like it would have done well in this game where they had the character speak his inner dialogue to you. I feel like they could have added a lot of emotion to it, where instead of you reading it however you want to read it, you could have it read how the writers want it to have it read.
Yeah, I think that could be true, but the thing I would say is that because the game was trying to be ambiguous, I think that if you added a voice actor in there, that perhaps a sentence told to you wouldn't be as ambiguous because it would be said in a certain way.
Right.
And I think that you could possibly take away from the ambiguity of it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I could see it going both ways. I feel like this is a game that isn't for everyone. It's purposely not for everyone. I think that some people just will not like this game. I think other people will really enjoy this game, and I appreciate what the game does. I didn't hate my time with it. I just don't think it was. If I would go back, it's not a game I would necessarily choose to play if that was my one game of the week, so to speak.
Yeah. But I mean, I think ultimately what it is, it's interesting. Whether you end up coming away liking it or not, you don't sit there and feel bored.
Definitely. And I have to give the developers props. This is something that most AAA developers can't even handle. When I turned the game on, first thing I saw was a little splash screen that said, your foot pedal is not configured for this game, because I use a dictation pedal for push to talk on Mumble or Skype or wherever. And the first thing it said was the splash screen that says, your foot pedal is not properly configured for this game. Go to this website where we have all different sorts of fixes. Most AAA games don't even realize that they need to worry about the foot pedal, so I have to give them props for worrying about that. I've gone to, I can't tell you how many games where my character just swings left for no reason and I can't move him, and I'm like, what the hell is going on? Oh, it's the foot pedal. I gotta give them props for that. It's good for them.
Yeah, but I mean, overall, I think it was. I mean, the game isn't very long. I mean, you can get through it without kind of getting the collectibles and stuff. Which, by the way, the collectibles actually, once you complete the game, you can replay it again, and the collectibles change the gameplay. So, for example, you can get boots, which basically are like anti-grav boots that make you jump way higher, and they kind of do things like that, which is really interesting.
It's interesting, yeah.
But I mean,
go back and play it now.
Yeah, but I mean, essentially, it's about maybe 3-4 hours long.
Yeah, I think I finished in about 3 hours. I've got maybe half the collectibles. So overall, if this was your one game you played this week, so if you had $20 at the beginning of this week and you could buy one game and you bought Disorder, would you have been happy with your purchase? I
would have. Yeah, I thought it was an interesting. I mean, it was an interesting experience. It was. I like games that kind of invoke thought and invoke emotion, and it's an interactive experience. I want to, if you're going to have a story and you're going to have gameplay, I like them to mix and to get you involved in some way, and I think Disorder does that. I mean, I think at the end of the day, it's a puzzle platformer, so it's limited in how it can incorporate the story,
right,
and that kind of thing. But ultimately, I think for a puzzle platformer that's done by a couple of people, I think that I've seen, games that have had teams of developers that haven't pulled off the quality of this game.
Right. Yeah, no, I agree, and as down as it seems like I am on this game, I enjoyed my time with it. The $15 price tag is a decent price tag for it. For some reason, I feel like this game should have been $10, but I'm not going to quibble over $5. I think that I would have been happy with this game if this was my one game this week. So yeah, that about does it for this episode. Do you have any comments you wanna wrap up before I finish the show?
I don't think so. Go visit my YouTube channel.
Yeah, I think we've had a good episode, good first episode. We did a good job. You did a good job. I did a good job. We all did a good job. So yeah, Cosmic, why don't you tell us where we can find your YouTube channel and where we can contact you?
You can follow me on Twitter at CosmicEngine99, and you can go on my YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/thecosmicengine, and go and subscribe. Shameless self-plug.
Yeah.
Go on.
Yeah, and you can find me on Twitter at GTeeg, that's GTEEG. You can also find the show at 20orLESS Podcast. That's 20, the number 20, or less podcast. You can email the show at 20orLESSpodcast@gmail.com. Once again, 20 is the number 20, not 20 written out. You can also email me at gaddockteeg@gaddockgaming.com. So if you'd like to get something just for me, you don't want Cosmic to see it for some reason. I don't know what. Maybe don't do that. I don't want to know what you're sending to just me and not him.
Send all your hate mail.
Oh God, no!
Yeah.
Send all the hate mail to the 20orLESS podcast.
Not
please.
happy with something Cosmic said? Send it to him.
So we should hopefully be on iTunes as soon as this episode gets published. Usually that takes about a week, so maybe by next weekend when we're recording episode 2, episode 1 should be up. But if not, you can go to gaddockgaming.com, which is where this episode will be hosted, and all these episodes will be hosted. We'll also be hosting them on YouTube. I don't think we've figured out where we want to host them yet. I don't know if you want to host them or if I want to host them. We'll figure out where we'll put them. Also, we record live on Sundays at 10 a.m. at twitch.tv/Gaddock_Teeg. So if you want to check out next week's episode, where I think we'll be covering H1Z1, which should be a bond burner for sure, you can check us out there next week. And if you don't have anything else...
Nope, good.
Well, I think we can end this episode. Thank you all for coming. And let's play the outro music.